Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, featuring the sharpest minds in marketing, inspirational case histories, and weekly insights you can apply to your business. Find out why top CMOs rank this podcast among their favorites. Now, here's your host, Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
A fellow agency owner asked me the other day, "Hey, Drew, do you actually get any value out of all these interviews? I mean, is there an ROI?" And I paused for a second and said, how long do you have? In truth, I'm fascinated by the the dynamic challenges that CMOs face, and have learned so much from every interviewee that even if the value stopped there, which it doesn't, the ROI for me and Renegade is off the charts. But another side benefit of doing several hundred interviews is that I've connected with an elite group of CMO scholars, including today's guest, Thomas Barta. Based in Cologne, Germany, Thomas is an authority on CMO leadership, having done extensive research on what it takes for CMOs to be successful leaders. And when I say extensive, I mean over 1,200 surveys plus several hundred interviews of both CMOs and their bosses who are sort of judging them and their success. The result is a book called The 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader: How to Succeed by Building Customer and Company Value. Now, before we get started, I also wanted to mention that this is episode 150. Woohoo!
Wow.
Yeah, 150. And so to make that a bit more special, we're recording in front of a live audience of CMOs. And thanks to my friends at Zoom who make this possible. In the third segment, these fine folk will get a chance to ask Thomas questions as well. Alrighty then, let's get started. Thomas, welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite.
Thank you for having me on, obviously, your 150th episode.
I know,
congratulations.
Well
done.
Cool, right?
That's
So,
pretty cool.
And number 100 was with my dad, which was pretty special. So that puts you up there. So
Wow.
Before you became a leadership coach, speaker, and author, you spent 7 years as a marketer at Kimberly-Clark and then another 11 years at McKinsey. In those 18 years, easy question, who did you learn from the most?
So, I mean, look, I'm a marketer like many people on the call. And I always learn the most from consumers, if I'm very honest, because those are the people who tell us what we need to do. And those are the people who know what really is important. The problem is, I think as a marketer, I had mixed success in getting that customer view right inside the company. And I think that has been the struggle over time. And I feel whenever I've been proud about my marketing life, it's when I've made that happen. When I wasn't so proud is when I failed.
Right. And so when you mean customer, you're looking for specifically an insight that allows you to create sort of transformational marketing.
Totally. I mean, look, if every marketer in this world is getting one thing right, and that is building those bridges between the people out there, the customers, the consumers, how we call them, and the CEO, we're doing well. Then we are the center of the action. Then the company knows what to do. It's just really hard to do. And that's why I'm doing all the research and books, because I'm trying to help figure out how we can bridge those.
And why is it so hard? I mean, you've got all sorts of ways of capturing voice of the customer, whether it's people that are calling in or reaching out to them. Why is it so hard to get an insight that you can really leverage?
Well, we don't have an insight problem in marketing. We have an execution problem. And if you think about this, everybody in marketing has the toughest job in the world, I believe. Now, in the business world, I'd say. And that is because think about what you do. Think about what every marketer does every single day. When you as a marketer say something, you typically talk about the future revenue, future profits, future customer behavior. What do you say to someone who promises you, I know the future? You just laugh, exactly. That's what you say. So whenever a marketer stand next to someone from finance, the marketer sounds less credible, less reliable, because that's the reality. Second, just imagine great customer experience. How many people in a firm would have to be involved? Like basically almost everybody, right? Think about the United Airlines dragging a paying passenger out of a plane, right? You can do the best brand campaigns in the world. You can't, that doesn't help you if that happens. And how many of those people report to marketing? very few. Marketers have a massive power gap. And then I'm not going to talk about marketing skills today. We talk about leadership, but the technical stuff is just moving on really fast. Right. So every marketer always has a skills gap, trust gap, power gap, skills gap. Really difficult. Now in this situation, be the central person that gets all the views together and finds consensus. Pretty tough. But the ones who get it right have rocking careers and change the world. So that's where we need to go.
Interesting. And it's funny because you and I talked before the show. This show, if you go back the other 149 episodes, is mainly a skills show. We talk about how to do marketing better. And so I'm excited to focus now and really talk about leadership. And what I liked about your book is first of all, for someone who needs little frameworks, you made it really simplified. I could get it down to one word, mobilize, and then I could move it down to 4 words, mobilize your colleagues, or 4 areas: mobilize your colleagues, mobilize your team, mobilize yourself. I missed the first one, mobilize your boss.
Your boss, exactly.
Yeah, duh. That's kind of
we always
important.
forget them, right?
Well, I don't know, but that's your first chapter in the book. Let's talk about, is that the place to start?
Yes. The big thing you learn when you move from being a marketer, which I loved for a little while before I got sick and tired of finance and all the people who wanted to cut my budgets, that's why I left, by the way, was that you're having a top management mindset, having the view of the CEO when you run a brand is big. Because maybe you work in a bank and maybe marketing just isn't on the agenda. And you know what? Maybe that's okay because you're in a regulatory crisis, and so you got to understand this. And we found in the research, and it was indeed the largest ever study on success of marketers, that the really good chief marketing officers had a really good connection to the top. And they didn't rely on, oh, this is what they told me in recruiting, I should come in and make us more customer focused, so off we go. No, they check back and saying, is this what we really mean? This is what's really important now. Do you agree? Do you still agree? And, we talked about this in the book about D. Dutta. I mean, there's this wonderful Indian guy who invented prepaid phones. Now, most people on the call or in this podcast or video will not know what was before because they are too young. But there was a time when it wasn't prepaid, and it was unthinkable, right, to do something where people pay before and then, make calls. I mean, the billing systems couldn't do it, and the finance people were saying, we don't want the poor people, stuff like this. And he changed everything by convincing the top management of 2 things. One is, this is what customers need, and he showed the videos and everything. I guess what a Betamax videos at this time. And the numbers, but he also made the numbers with finance. He worked with operations to figure out how this works. And he talked to the CEO several times and said, look, guys, why are you afraid of this? How can I help, bridging those gaps? And he bridged all of those. And that's what he worked in what we call the value creation zone. He got customer needs and company needs to overlap. It was a really difficult fight. But think about prepaid. It's the #1 mobile phone product in the world. And it's just because someone done the homework in getting the 2 together. So that's why it's so important. That's why we can't overemphasize it more.
And what's interesting to me, so, CMO longevity is obviously a thing that comes up a lot. And, I had Kathy Button-Bell on the show, and she'd been CMO for 20 years. Now, she'd had the same boss for 20, he'd been there 1 year longer. It seems like when a CMO goes in for interview for the job, they should be saying, is this a CEO that's going to stand behind me that I can work with or not? And if that's and so do you find in your research that the CMOs are doing a good job sort of qualifying the CEO and saying this guy or gal is really going to support me in a pinch and help me do my job?
Well, here's the thing, right? You're asking a great question, and I like this question. And by the way, Kim Whitler and her colleagues, they've written a wonderful Harvard Business Review article about this, and because they were exactly looking at this issue, and it's very consistent with what we found. The alignment between the marketer and the CEO is often poor. And there are exceptions, and those are the ones we cite all the time. And you cited one, I could cite Sil Salar, Diageo, I could cite many others. But it's often not aligned. And the reason is that the CEO doesn't often know exactly what they're looking for. They hear these things like customer focus and what have you. And then they think there's someone coming in who has this like magic wand and can do it. In reality, it's a change management job. It's a tough job to work with everybody. And the CEO needs to understand this, and they don't always. And the marketing needs to understand that whatever the CEO has once said may not be the only truth. So you got to check back, right? It's like in a relationship, if I may say so, right? The first couple of years you're together, it's not the one thing you've said will then be carved in stone and that's how it is. No, you have to figure out, oh, things are changing, right? There's a new trend coming in here. There's a new interest. Maybe there is new priorities. And you have to consistently as a marketer align. That's why maybe if you have the same boss for 10 years, you know exactly, what you need. I mean, maybe it also gets a bit boring, but I guess that alignment is, I mean, what do I want to say, right? It's huge. I mean,
we'll link to, by the way, we'll link to the show notes in that article, because it's a great article. I've read it.
It's been a nice article.
And it's important because as you get into the job, if your CEO isn't there and you're just not going to succeed.
Very different.
And a perfect place to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll sort of dive into a few of these other powers and get specific. So stay with us.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neiser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
Okay, we're back, and this is episode 150, and my guest is Thomas Barta, and we have been talking about the importance of CEO and CMO alignment, but that's really just one of the 12 powers. And what I loved about, so I went through the powers, and I did this. I ranked them by percentage impact. And I added up 4 of them. Let's see, which one? I added up 4 of them, and I got to 50%. No, I got to 60%, right? And I said, okay, let's see. Get the mix right. That's 20%. Fall in love with your world. That's 18%. Hit the walk the halls. That's 13, right? And then let's see, 12 is deliver returns no matter what. That's 60%. Boom, done. Can we just focus on those 4 and call it a day?
It won't make a big step forward, but what you've just cited are different leadership behaviors in those 4 different areas: mobilizing your boss, your colleagues, your team, and yourself. And in the 12 powers of a marketing leader, what we have done with this massive research, you already said it, is 1,232 questionnaires. We had 68,000 assessments of leaders from the INSEAD database. And we really only listed things that matter, which means we had a list of over 100 leadership behaviors, traits, things like geographies and all these things. And of those, only the 12 big buckets were the ones that were left after we've done the analysis was a neural network. So everything that we're talking about has a real impact. So the trick will be to be above the bar. You got to be above the bar on mobilizing your boss, your team, your colleagues, yourself, even if technically, right, you could say, I do half of it, but then I got already half. The other half could be enough for you to get fired or to just be totally ineffective. So no, strengths-based leadership really works, and strengths-based development really works if you're above the bar. So that's the number one job, and then you can spike, and that's great.
All right, so these are all skills. Is it sort of taken for granted that you know marketing and you know marketing skills are sort of, I mean, these are all leadership traits and so forth, but is it taken for granted that you're a good marketer? It's like, you know, fluoride in a toothpaste?
So it was a great question, right? Because we did this neural network to figure out what matters overall. And there was this big question, like, what is it, right? And then people saying, oh, it's gender. People say it's personality. We weren't sure. And then the numbers came back and they were full of surprises. B2B versus B2C, very little impact. Gender, very little impact. So when it comes to screwing up in marketing, we have actually real equality, which is quite nice. Personality, reasonably small. So sorry, can't blame your parents. Under 5%, you have think about skills gap, power gap, and so you have to. And then came skills. And they were 15%. And that was an interesting insight. And it means two things. One is, as a great marketer, you got to know how to do branding, pricing, and stuff. But then, of course, many people know that. So the bar, of course, in skills, is already here. So we didn't have people who didn't have skills. I think what got clear is that they just didn't make the difference between the truly successful marketers and not. Yeah, you got to be above the bar. And you said something earlier. You said falling in love with your world and getting the mix right. For those of you who haven't read the book, these are traits of understanding your industry, your products, your company, but also getting the right skills into the team. Yes, this stuff matters, and it's big. It will not make the difference between you being okay successful and being very successful. That is where the leadership comes in. That is where the changing people's agendas come in. That's really gets you from good to great.
Yeah, it's funny. It's completely consistent. I had Greg Welch from Spencer Stewart, who runs the CMO practice there, and he really talked about that's what we're talking about here is leadership and how that's what distinguishes the good from the great. So totally aligned with you there. I'm wondering, are there, as you do coaching and you assess these some of these CMOs, are there some traits that are just harder for CMOs to master than others?
So most CMOs are very good at figuring out what the company needs when they put their mind to it. So that typically is something we can crack reasonably fast. And it typically is this, oh my God, I didn't think of that type of thing. Easy. I think what is a little bit harder for a lot of CMOs is to start to see themselves as role models that have to mobilize all the other people and accepting that all these people can say no. And it's like, it's like being angry about gravity. You can, but it doesn't help you, right? You will still drop. Right. So I think getting that behavior it's just harder. It's just, and for a lot of people, it means after years of frustration, having to figure out that it's okay to be frustrated. But then, deploying some tools. And then I think once people are on the way, because marketers are great storytellers, they're very energetic people, very inspirational people. So they have all the skills. I think it's just putting it together in the right way and just like.
And have you been able to you do this assessment and you say, you know what, you're really scoring low on these three areas. And you found that with some coaching, they can get sort of mastery of that and sort of move from good to great?
Yeah, we have as always, these are humans, right? Everybody's very different. But I tell you, we have there's one person who has always been exceptionally good at marketing. For that person was the next step up, and everybody was not considering them because they were really good at marketing, and everybody thought they're great, keep going, right? But of course, you want to develop. And to position for the next role, they had to talk the company language, they had to push the company agenda and even ask questions outside marketing. And we actually picked supply chain in that case, and we were, and the person has been able to position himself as a true leader. And we were basically playing this like, if you were the CEO, what would you do? What were the questions you would ask? And it has worked. It took you 3-4 months of meeting after meeting, and people were like surprised initially, but it can work. We had someone else who was always super diligent, a micromanager, and who basically failed to develop people who do the same thing, which is going out and walking the halls and mobilizing people. And over a 3 to 4 months period, they've been able to change course, let people try things, gave them permission, that the team does the job. Yes, these things are well possible, and it comes back to the insight that personality is such a small factor. There's a lot of applied science, a lot of stuff you can learn and pick up and try. It's like brushing your teeth. You can improve your technology. It's going to take a while. but you can get there. So it's possible.
Interesting. So it's not about personality, and it's fascinating.
Not
it's
too
like,
much, no.
It's interesting. It's like if you're a Myers-Briggs fan and you look at the quadrants and you say, well, these people are this and so forth. What's interesting about that is, they've been presidents of the United States from all 4 quadrants. They've been great leaders from all 4 quadrants. But they figured out mastery. And one of the things that's interesting in this is you can't know everything. So and what's funny, you talked earlier about the CEO sort of having certain expectations. And these days, the board of directors will say, we need digital, whatever that means. We need digital. We got to find a CMO who knows digital. So they hire somebody who's done a, social media campaign and built a website, and that's digital. And it's funny, but from a skill standpoint, you can't know everything. So what are these great CMOs doing to sort of fill those gaps?
So first off, what's very interesting to realize is that there is a vacuum in almost every organization I've gone to, and that is digital strategy. And I don't mean in marketing. I mean in the company. And a lot of CEOs are struggling to get help, because if you think about the firm, you have the operations, you have the offer, and then you have like the whole business model. Digital could play a role everywhere, and a lot of CEOs are completely confused. They just don't, it's because it's difficult. So they're always looking for people who can help. And I tell you what, if you are as a CMO, you can come into this firm and say, okay, I looked at what you're doing. I'm not the expert on digital everywhere, but I think maybe in the operations, there's a massive opportunity to simplify. I don't know what the tool is, but look, I can get people in. In marketing, there are 2 or 3 areas that will give us the biggest bang for the buck. In a way, making the top level case of what matters in digital. Those are the people who are really respected. The people that are not respected are the ones that get lost in 45 digital marketing tools and then ultimately get frustrated because they still can't measure everything, which we know is true, right? So it's just more of the same stuff. Just imagine 50 years ago, you would have come into the firm saying, I'm the one who knows radio. Right. And they say, great, do your radio thing. Would they have considered you for bigger jobs? No, because you're the radio guy. So it's the same as digital. So the trick for marketers in digital is not to know everything. In fact, you can't. It would be crazy. But a doctor can't know everything, right? But what a doctor would know is what is the problem and what are the specialists we need, what are the things we can look at. And then you go deep on a few things. Right. You would not expect your general practitioner to know every single detail of every single disease. And that's what marketers are getting frustrated with. And no, you can't, but don't. And the really good CMOs, they have a strategy to say, I give you the example. One guy I work with, they figured out that their B2B, B2C firm, right? They do both. And everybody was on a B2C, blah, blah, blah. And he said, look, you know what the biggest challenges we have is that the B2B buyers who get stuff from us hate our brochures. And they go somewhere else. And we losing contracts every single month because of that. Guys, whatever we're going to talk about, let's go there, let's fix that, and let's make us the place where they want to go to get all their insights, and then the architects came in, we have done the RI and stuff. It was a very different type of investment. So what I mean here is people who can set priorities are much more relevant for CEOs than people who know nitty-gritty tools that, by the way, keep changing.
Leader first, skills second. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with audience participation, so stay with us. Did you know that Renegade Thinkers Unite was ranked number 2 of the top 10 podcasts for CMOs by Crackerjack Marketing? Wow, we're really honored. Now, we couldn't do that without amazing guests, and we've had some amazing CMOs on this show, and also terrific listeners like you all. If you like what we do here, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Also, as a special thanks, I'd like to send you a free ebook on Renegade Thinkers. Now for that, just email drew@renegade.com. Now let's get back to the show. Okay, we're back, and we are now ready for the audience participation portion of this show. First up is Vishal Dahar, who is the CMO of Syrian Labs. Very interesting company. And Vishal, what's your question?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and very nice hearing the first part of the show. My question was, the deliver returns no matter what, which is power number 2. And if you look at the role of marketing over the years that I've been in marketing, has become more and more elastic. And that's from traditional definitions to managing partnerships, recruitment, customer experience, investor relations, sales programs. Is there still a core in that role of a CMO, or is it so broad today that it just, as you said, deliver returns no matter what?
Ask 10 people what is a marketer, and you get about 11 answers. Right? And it's true, right? And marketers are strange because it's one of the few jobs where you have a title and what you do might maybe fundamentally different from what your neighbor does, which is, by the way, one of the brand problems we have. No, so first off, the role is super broad, and it's great that you highlighted this, and we looked, by the way, in the 12 powers of what marketers are doing, and you're right, this is a massive range. But whatever you're doing, there is still, however, the following challenge. If you think about a typical board agenda, there's a lot of discussion about revenues. There's a lot of debate on costs, which then in total gives you profit, right? And then there are some long-term strategic questions. What if you as a marketer, what if you're not revenue? You ultimately cost. And then you get into corners of cost of doing business and we need this maybe type of stuff. I believe you don't have a choice as a marketer to at least have the discussion about the value you create for the firm. And that is, revenue is a good proxy because that's what people are looking at. Everybody understands there's impact and there is time. And maybe some of the things you do will have impact long down the way. The marketers that are not seen as revenue, that are seen as doing some cost of doing business functions, those are the ones that I see in trouble.
So let me ask you a follow-up on that, because what that can lead to, and by the way, there's no doubt, Vishal, that the CMO is the most bespoke role. I mean, that's one thing that blows me away after all these interviews is everyone that I talk to has a different set of responsibilities. So that's hard. But if you focus on revenue, what that could mean is you're mainly focused on acquisition and not focused on, say, retention and even employees who you need to enable retention and to enable it. So where's this balance?
So the job you have as a marketer is to explain to people how marketing works, because believe it or not, they don't understand this sometimes. And I have the wonderful example of a CMO of a building firm, right? I mean, how important is marketing for the CEO? They didn't even think that would play any role. Who applied the very simple funnel that we all know by saying, look, here's your sale, but here's everybody. And my job is to bring more people towards that so the sales team can basically pull. And here's what we've done this year because we made more people prefer us, which helped the sales team. By the way, my estimation is X to Y $1 million. The CEO knew that wasn't accurate, but the CEO also was stunned because he's never ever thought about that long-term effect ever. And funnels are a great way to quantify in communication, right? What the value is, even if it's long-term. And the tip number 2 is just get together with finance. I mean, they might be your biggest challenges, so why not get them on board? Because they know the marketing role will ultimately be useful, but crack together how important it is. And if you do this at least for 80% or 60 or 70% of your work, there will still be the 20% that you don't worry about, like maybe employee marketing. Yeah, great, let's do that. But let's do the first half.
Okay, great question. Who's next?
Drew, I've got one.
Okay, great. Dan Loudon, who is the CMO of White Ops.
Great. Thanks, Drew, and thanks, Thomas. Question for you, Thomas. You talked about mobilizing teams within the organization. one of the key things in my organization, there are brilliant data scientists, they're brilliant threat intelligence analysts, and I want to give them a voice, and I want to mobilize them. They're more of a type that normally doesn't do that type of thing. I would love to get your view on how I could potentially mobilize a group like that, or some examples of how you've done that for employees of the company to really uplift the storytelling and uplift the brand.
So Jim, you probably know the time when Ford was basically bankrupt, and it was really tricky. I mean, the firm didn't really spend marketing. Jim Farley was the CMO at that time. I talked extensively with him about what he did, and he had a depressed marketing team. He had everybody saying that's useless. We don't need this. How about sales and engineering? And he said, you know what, guys, what we're doing here is we're not doing marketing. I tell you what, this is the blue Ford Oval, and the reason that people are buying Fords, my parents and my neighbors have bought Fords, is that they were proud of having it. What we need to do is, this is our job. We got to bring the pride back in the Ford Oval. That is the job. And then from this, and with story in mind, he led the team to do things and invite. I mean, there's a whole sort of series you can do with the teams, but it all starts with giving the team a very strong purpose, something that they want to talk about over dinner, rather than in the team room. And it won't be profit, it won't be margins, it will be something else. And getting them to believe in this. And then if you apply other team mobilization skills, you have a great platform. So that will be my starting point.
All right. Next. Who has a question?
Hi, Drew.
Oh, hey, Jed. Jed Albert, who is the CMO of Riskified.
Hi, Drew. Thanks for having me. So my question is, I once worked for a CEO who was very adamant that there are no 10% goals. So if you have a 10% goal, it's something that just never gets addressed, and it's nothing that you're able to focus on. So I have a two-part question. So is it, in looking at the different powers, is it that exceptional or great CMOs have to have all 12, or can they succeed if they're, only world-class in, a handful of these? And, how does that play out? And then do you have any advice on how to, focus on 12 different attributes in sort of your everyday?
Can you tell me what a 10% goal is?
So a 10% goal would be to say, look, so if I have 10 things that I need to do to achieve my bonus, each is 10%.
Oh, I understand that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how many things can we focus on overall, right?
Yes.
So I think if I understand your question correctly, do you have to be good at all of these things? And then the second is, how could you even get there? As I said earlier, strengths-based development is really good if you're above the bar. And the powers, as we've researched them, they're already 12 of 100. So we're like 88, that we've taken aside. So the rest is important. So you got to be above the bar. You got to be good enough. And most people can get there. It's not, these are not rocket science things. If you go through a book, you see like, oh, I can do that, I could do this. So you have to be above the bar. You can spike in a few, and you always will, because that's you, right? That's you. Some people are really, really good with bosses and they love it. For other people, talking to the boss is a real pain in the neck, but they can get there. Team mobilization is the other way, right? Some people just love their team. They really, really do. And other people think, look, okay, I need them. I got to get better at this. And that's okay, as long as you're above the bar. What I would do is I would step back and say, what's my value creation zone this year? What is the one big thing that I could help my company do differently? It could be a marketing thing. It could be even outside marketing. And then think about which of the skills would really help you get there. Because that is how you learn leadership, in my view, is you have to apply them to a real issue you have, rather than doing some artificial exercise. So that's what I would look for. And then, pick the one or two get better. And I think you're on your way.
I love that expression, value creation zone. It's just so important, and it really, so many of you are in your role, the folks that they're in for very recently, and so it's so hard because you see so many things that you want to fix. But I think going back to what Thomas said, it feels like one of the value creation zones is if you don't have a purpose, if your brand is not certainly unique at this moment, then you need to have the courage to sort of step up and say, all right, the real value we're going to do is we're going to create a North Star for the company. We're going to find a clear and express a clear purpose, and we're going to get people involved in it so that they believe in it. Is that a fair summary there? I just put some words in your mouth, Thomas.
I think it's a great summary. And look, it's 2019, right? Everything is called inspire and purpose and what have you, right? I mean, no magazine without it. But it does really work really well, because if you think about it as a marketer, you have a job where everybody can say no, right? Bosses, teams, colleagues, everybody. You gotta need a lot of energy. And there is this case of Simon Kang, and Simon Kang is a great example for this. And Simon Kang was a manager at a company called LG nowadays. You know how they were called before? They were called Lucky Gold Star.
Right.
So you can imagine how cool that was. And he had the US business, which basically meant he had no business because there wasn't anything, and a shitty brand and terrible products. And he was basically given that job so that he would resign. That was the idea of his boss, I think. That's what everybody suggested. And he had this dream, and this is a real story, and I met him at Seoul Airport. He told me this story in a lot of detail. He's a very humble guy. He said, you know what? I sat there on my sofa, I was half asleep, and I said, you know what I want? I want the LG logo on Times Square. If I could do anything, that would be it. And it sounded like a funny idea, but in fact, what happened is over a period of a couple of years, it really kept him going. And he had this idea of coloring, making red and green fridges. So they were the first ones to have these like colored things that can buy everywhere. And he did all sorts of guerrilla things. He wasn't even a marketer. He had learned this, but that kept him going. And I think that this true purpose is not like what you write on some papers. It is what you genuinely believe in. If you find something like this, it can really get you going for a couple of years. And I encourage every marketer to find that. It's a bit of work, but if you have it, boy, I mean, you can really push the pedal.
So Peter, we haven't heard from you. And we haven't heard from Kevin.
All right. Well, I have a question.
Let me introduce you first. This is Kevin Felice, who is the CMO of Cofense. Go for it.
Thanks, Drew. Hey, Thomas. Earlier in the conversation, you talked about being a revenue producer versus perceived as a cost center. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure in the 149 podcasts that preceded this one, there's been a lot of talk about marketing attribution. Mm. What would be your advice for CMOs in terms of connecting the dots between the work you're doing and actually producing revenue? And what is the best way to communicate the value you're creating to your CEO and to your stakeholders? Mm-hmm.
So if I understand correctly, it's about how you're actually proving the value, how you're proving the returns that you are producing. I love this question because it is indeed, even I don't know how many years we're now doing marketing, 100 or something, right? It's been a question that's been around, forever. And I'm sure it will be around for the next 100 years because we'll never be perfect. One of the challenges we have in revenue attribution is we will never really be able to do it well. Give you an example. The message, the actual message, if you have two very different executions, can have radically different returns no matter which medium you use, frequency and context and all these things, right? So there's so many factors, it's almost impossible to generally prove. And that is exactly the problem. A lot of marketers get stuck in trying to prove things at that level. And you up against the highest possible wall you can think of, while what we often see when I talk to very senior leaders is that isn't even what they're asking for. Sometimes I see CEOs who don't even understand or see the basic connections. And I would always start there. I mean, this is target group marketing, if you think about it this way, right? I mean, in a way, you have to run a campaign that people who don't know marketing that well really understand. So 2 options that work well. I said one mentioned earlier, a really basic funnel, like a super basic funnel. And this is like very basic, and you can do it with 1 question in marketing research, because you can figure out where everybody is and just use that. Triangulate, get 3 estimates, estimate from 3 different ways how your marketing has helped in broad ranges. I don't think we need $5,000, $10,000. I think what we need here is, X% of my budget, 10%, 20%, 30%. And have the challenge. And I talked earlier about Jim Farley, and he did this really well at Ford. They developed a model together with finance to do roughly something like this. It was a 2-page model. It was basically saying TV does roughly this. If you invest that much, it will roughly give us this ranges, And he presented it to a lot of this country, the regional CEOs, and every time he got a challenge, he said, great, I love your challenge. You know what? Help me make this better. But I'm not going to leave the room unless you have agreement on the basic principles. And then he went back with finance teams and did some more numbers. But I think he solved this on the first 20% of attribution and not on the last 80. And that to me is the challenge. And if you get this right, I don't think any CEO in the world will challenge you that you couldn't figure out where that $4,000 went, because they know it's impossible. So that's the number one. In a way, it's 2 things. One is a simple model. Work with the finance guys, get them on board, have them challenge it, work with them. And thirdly is, of course, the language. I love to show this. There's a chart a friend of mine has given me. He's a CMO of a very large firm, 2016 marketing priorities. And he was up there with segmentation review. We wanted to include the millennials. He wanted to increase programmatic across all channels and aside the CEO, whatever the fuck that means. And he had some VR trials. And the problem is, outside marketing, I mean, I'm telling you, look, you're very senior, right? This is a very senior, and I'm telling you things that we all can laugh about. But, basic things like revenue, customers, and profit, it's just a great language. Even attribution is something that they don't want to hear. So keep the language clean and basically run a campaign, simple model, get finance involved, sort out the language and start there. And once you got the 20% fixed, you have 80% of the credibility, I think, and then you do the rest.
It's funny. I think the key that I took away in this is if you can get the finance guy to believe, then you have a fighting chance of getting the CEO to believe. I love that notion. It is, I think one of my interviews a few years ago with the former CMO of American Express, he said, we have a tendency to overvalue the things we can measure and undervalue the things that we can't. And that's so hard in our business, because if you just look at and say, I'm only going to spend money on things that I can measure, the challenge that you have is you're going to end up with, we're only spending money on search. and you can't grow a brand because how did they get to the search engine? Awareness. How did they get awareness? Well, they went to an event or they did this other thing and they saw it and so forth. So it's hard. I will say there's a lot of folks out there that are big fans of Byron Sharp because he did simplify measurement. He's essentially said awareness matters. Number one, it matters a lot more than you think about. You're not going to close the sale with the ad. So make sure that when the sales guy calls, they know who you are. And I love that. But there's famous CEOs saying you can't eat awareness. So I don't know. Anyway, it's a lifelong battle. But you have to try. And I think helping what's interesting to me is everybody thinks they're a marketer and everybody wants to be involved in marketing. So if you could do a little barter with the CFO and say, hey, dude, I'm going to teach you everything about marketing. In fact, I'm going to involve you in this. You're going to think it's really cool. And you're going to help me come up with some kind of marketing model attribution that you believe in. And then you can rock it. We haven't heard from Peter Weingart.
Does everybody hear me now?
All right, we can hear you. He was
all right,
the star
technology.
of episode 44. All right, take us home. You got one question. Go for it.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk about a practical thing here. I love how in the book it talks about mobilizing oneself to walk the halls. And I think Tom Peters used to call that management by wandering around. I feel I've never learned as much about my customers as when I spend time with them in stores or other places, or other people in the office, or my competitors by going to conventions. But probably like a lot of senior executives here, I don't have time to wander the halls if I'm not in meetings from the moment I walk in to the moment I walk out. How does a senior person find time to do the kinds of things that you're describing, to have the freedom to wander around and learn the business?
So you asked, if I understand your question correctly, you're saying you're so busy, it's hard for you to walk the halls because you're in meetings too often, right? How do you
Absolutely.
make there are two ideas. Let's see how practical they are for you. I had a CMO who started, he was at a steel company. And you can imagine, right? Steel is an interesting beast. And he figured that in week 2 that one of his problems is he wouldn't be able to really know the products, the company, everything. So he agreed with his boss that he leaves marketing for 8 weeks and does nothing else but steel. And then he came back. And he said, this has been the biggest and most important thing I've ever done in my entire career. Because I now know the people, I now understand the product, I know exactly what the people at the shop for. And he's still selling the stories. I mean, he was only there for 8 weeks, but it made for 2 years of stories. Now, that may not be practical for you, but I always suggest if your marketer starts in a firm, can you not start in marketing for the first 8 weeks, which sounds tricky, but it makes a big difference. The second question is this: walk into halls and getting to know the people. If you think about this, you're in the business of change. As a marketer, you're not in the business of marketing. Marketing is change. You want to change what customers do, what your colleagues do. It's business of change. You can't do change by email. It's a context sport. And like with sport, right? If you want to get fit and you want to do it when your calendar allows, you will never get fit, because the truth is your calendars will never allow it. So if I would sit with you, I would go with you through your calendar and say, okay, how can you squeeze in an hour here and there to do what we just talked about? So no, I don't think it will happen by accident. I think you will have to take a very purposeful effort and prioritize it. And I tell you what, I know a lot of CEOs who just do that. They say, I got to be out there, and this is my secretary blocks the time. So I hope that was practical.
It's I had an interview with actually a couple times with Beth Comstock when she was at GE. And she actually quantified and said she spent 25% of her time out of the office, either with customers or with new folks that could sort of inspire her. She said, I'm not a creative person, but boy, did I get a lot of fodder out there. And I love that. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I know all of your listeners, you're going, wait, my commute was over 20 minutes ago. How can you still be talking? Anyway, I thought this was a really interesting conversation. First, I want to thank the live audience. Thank you so much for being here with us. Second, I want to thank Thomas. I thought you had so many interesting insights. I love that marketing equals change, and that you, as a result of that, you need to be thinking about the value creation that you can do on the highest level possible for the organization. That's just such a great perspective to have, and inspiring. So thank you, Thomas, for being on the show. And I want to ask you, where can people find you?
Well, Thomas Barta is, the good news is not many people have that name. So if you Google me, I'll pop up everywhere. The other thing is, if you have some cash left, 12 Powers of a Marketing Leader, I'll make $1 per book. So you make me seriously rich by buying it. No, seriously, that's how publishing works, right? No, but if you wanna learn or perhaps do something for your team, it is currently still the only leadership book out there for marketers, and I believe we can probably all make a difference.
And for all of the folks that are in the audience today, we've got copies for you. So consider yourself lucky.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, there you go. All right. So to the listeners, thank you for hanging with us on the show. And if you enjoyed it, do me a favor and go to your favorite podcast player and give us a fabulous 5-star rating, and or share it with a friend. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.